You think you know what it means to be truly alone, but imagine being stranded on an island where the sound of waves isn't comforting, it's a warning. Tonight on True Scare Tales, you're about to hear 3 true island horror stories with endings so terrifying they'll haunt your dreams. Before we dive in, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to True Scare Tales so you never miss a story that chills you to the bone. Now picture this, a small, uncharted island miles away from civilization, where the sun sets faster than anywhere else and shadows seem to move on their own. This is where our first story begins. It all started with a young backpacker named Alex. He had always dreamed of exploring remote islands, places where few humans had ever set foot. One day, he came across a tiny speck of land on a map that wasn't on any tourist guide. It was described only in passing, with warnings from old sailors about disappearing vessels and strange happenings. Alex, being fearless and perhaps a bit reckless, decided this was exactly the adventure he needed. He chartered a small boat, packed his gear, and set sail with the sun blazing overhead. The journey itself was uneventful, a calm sea and bright skies lulling him into a false sense of security. But as he neared the island, the water darkened unnaturally, and a thick fog rolled in, hiding the jagged cliffs from view. Alex docked his boat, feeling a strange chill despite the tropical heat. The island seemed deserted, yet the trees rustled as if whispering secrets. He laughed nervously, telling himself that the wind was just playing tricks on his mind. That night, as he set up his small tent near a creek, he heard footsteps, soft, deliberate, circling his camp. At first, he thought it was an animal, but the pace and pattern felt too deliberate, almost human. Hours passed, and every time he tried to sleep, the footsteps returned, now accompanied by a low, guttural humming that didn't match any bird or animal he'd ever heard. He convinced himself it was a figment of his imagination, but when dawn broke, he found something etched into the sand around his tent, symbols. Sharp, jagged, almost ritualistic. Alex, heart pounding, decided to explore the island to find help or at least understand what was happening. The deeper he went into the forest, the more he realized that the island wasn't natural. The trees twisted in impossible shapes, shadows stretched against logic, and the air smelled faintly of decay, like something had died recently or long ago. Hours turned into a full day, and Alex found signs of old camps. Fire pits long cold, tools rusted, personal items decayed, but no signs of people. Then he stumbled upon a hollowed-out cave by a cliff, where he noticed scratch marks on the walls and bones, small ones, perhaps animal, maybe human. Panic set in. Something didn't want him there. Something had been waiting. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the humming returned, now louder and closer, echoing off the cliffs. Alex ran back to his boat, only to find it gone. The tide hadn't risen that high. Something else had moved it. Trapped, he tried shouting, banging on rocks, anything to attract attention. But the fog thickened, swallowing his voice. The final night on the island was unbearable. Alex could feel it watching him, sometimes just beyond the fog, sometimes in the shadows of the trees. He tried to sleep, but was jolted awake by the sensation of fingers brushing his face, cold and wet. He ran blindly into the forest, crashing through undergrowth, until he stumbled and fell into a shallow depression. And there, illuminated by moonlight piercing the fog, he saw them. Figures, dozens of them, humanoid but elongated, with hollow, black eyes that reflected no light. They didn't move quickly, but their patience was terrifying. Alex felt his sanity fray as they simply stared, circling, waiting. When a search team arrived weeks later, they found the island empty. No boat, no footprints, no backpack. Nothing except the same jagged symbols etched into the sand where Alex had set up camp. Locals whisper that the island claims anyone who dares spend a night there, and no one dares sail too close. Some say they can hear the faint sound of humming at night, carried by the waves to the nearest inhabited shore. And that's the story of Alex, the island that shouldn't exist, and the horror that waits silently for the next curious traveler. If you got chills from this, make sure to comment below what you think Alex saw, and share this story with friends who love the thrill. The second story takes us to a different kind of island, one that isn't marked on any modern map, a place sailors quietly avoid. This story is about a couple, Mark and Lisa, who loved adventure but weren't prepared for what awaited them. They had rented a small yacht for a 2-week trip along a cluster of islands, hoping for quiet beaches and sunsets. One evening, as the sun dipped low, a local fisherman warned them about a tiny island not far from their planned route. He spoke of strange lights at night and people who visited but never returned. Mark laughed it off, insisting that legends were just stories meant to scare tourists. Lisa, however, felt a knot in her stomach she couldn't shake. The next morning, they sailed toward the island, its shoreline hidden behind thick fog that seemed to appear out of nowhere. As they approached, the air grew unnaturally still. The waves were calm, almost glassy, reflecting the gray sky like a mirror. The moment they set foot on the sand, Lisa noticed something strange. The beach was perfectly smooth, as if no one had ever walked there. No shells, no driftwood, nothing. Just sand. The couple explored cautiously, finding abandoned huts in the dense forest that looked old but intact. Inside, they found scattered belongings, clothes, dishes, journals, but nothing recent. It felt like the island had been frozen in time. By nightfall, the forest came alive with whispers. Lisa swore she heard someone calling her name, faint but unmistakable. Mark insisted it was the wind, but he too felt the unease settle over him like a heavy blanket. They decided to stay in one of the huts, locking the door and trying to rest. Around midnight, a strange fog rolled in, thick and cold. The whispering turned into murmurs, and soon they heard footsteps circling the hut. Mark peeked outside, but the fog was too dense. Then, through the mist, they saw faint glowing figures moving slowly toward them. The glow wasn't like fireflies or any natural light. They were humanoid, but their movements were unnatural, jerky, almost like they were gliding above the ground. Panic set in. They tried to leave, running through the fog, but the island seemed to shift around them. Paths they had walked earlier disappeared, replaced by dense thickets. Every direction looked the same. Mark and Lisa felt the island itself was alive, closing in on them. Hours passed, or maybe minutes, they had no way of telling, and then they stumbled upon a clearing. In the center stood a stone altar, strange carvings etched deep into it. Around the altar were dozens of objects, bones, trinkets, and photographs of people, some obviously taken decades ago, others disturbingly recent. Their hearts sank. The island had a history, and it wasn't friendly to visitors. Suddenly, the figures appeared at the edge of the clearing. Lisa screamed, and the figures paused, almost as if considering them. One of the figures stepped forward, and the glow from its body illuminated a face. Pale, elongated, and expressionless, eyes hollow and endless. Mark tried to grab Lisa, but they felt their limbs heavy, as if invisible hands were pinning them to the ground. They fought, screamed, and somehow broke free, running blindly through the fog. Hours later, they found their yacht, but it had been moved several hundred feet from where they had left it, as if the island had spat them back out. When they returned to the mainland, no one believed their story. They showed photos of the altar and the carved symbols, but experts insisted they were old ruins, nothing supernatural. Yet Mark and Lisa knew the truth. The island had marked them, watched them, and might still be calling them back. They never went near the water at night again, and sometimes, in quiet moments, they hear whispers over the wind, repeating their names. True Scare Tales brings you these chilling stories, so you can understand that some places are alive in ways we can't comprehend. If this gave you goosebumps, drop a comment below sharing what you would have done if you were in their shoes. And don't forget to share this with anyone who loves real-life horror adventures. The last story takes us to an island that most maps ignore entirely. It's small, jagged, and shrouded in mist, but it has a reputation that locals won't openly speak about. Our story follows a man named Ethan, a marine biologist who loved studying rare island ecosystems. One summer, he chartered a small boat to study plant life and wildlife on an uninhabited island far from the coast. The first few days were normal: sun, sand, and the distant cries of seabirds. But on the fourth night, something happened that changed everything. Ethan had set up a small research station near a cliff overlooking the ocean. As darkness fell, he noticed strange movements in the water. At first, he assumed it was dolphins or seals, but the shapes were too large, too deliberate. They seemed to be swimming toward the island, circling it, almost herding him in. He shrugged it off, thinking he was tired and imagining things. That night, he recorded unusual sounds with his equipment, low, almost melodic chants carried by the wind. They weren't human, and they weren't animal. The sound was hypnotic, a mix of rhythm and tone that seemed to reach into his mind. The next morning, Ethan explored the cliffs and discovered caves he hadn't seen before. Inside, the walls were covered with carvings, symbols depicting humans intertwined with fish-like creatures, eyes staring from the stone that seemed alive. The deeper he went, the colder the air became, and the farther from the cliff he walked, the more he felt watched. By nightfall, the chanting returned, louder this time, echoing off the cliffs in a way that made it impossible to locate the source. Ethan tried to leave the cave, but the fog outside had thickened unnaturally, and he realized he couldn't see his boat anymore. As the hours passed, Ethan noticed something terrifying. The wildlife he had studied, the birds, the crabs, even the fish near the shore, were behaving strangely. They were moving toward the cave, almost like they were hurting him inside. He felt trapped. Then, in the shadows of the cliffs, figures emerged, humanoid, scaled, with eyes that reflected the pale moonlight. They didn't rush him or attack, but their presence was oppressive, controlling. Ethan tried to document everything with his camera, but it kept malfunctioning, the batteries dying instantly, as if the island itself rejected his technology. Desperate, he decided to climb the cliff and signal for help. As he reached the top, he glimpsed dozens of figures below, standing silently on the rocks and staring at the ocean. Then he saw it, a massive silhouette rising from the water, a creature unlike anything he had ever imagined, blending human and sea life, moving with deliberate grace. Ethan froze, and in that moment, he understood why the island had been abandoned. The beings weren't just guarding it, they were controlling it, luring visitors to ensure the island remained theirs. When Ethan finally returned to civilization, he tried to warn authorities and fellow scientists, but maps of the island had been removed or altered. No one believed him, dismissing his recordings as hoaxes or hallucinations. Yet he knew the truth, and every night he dreams of the island, the chanting, the figures, the creature watching him from the waves. True Scare Tales brings you this final story to remind you that some islands aren't meant to be visited. Some places have a life, a will, and a hunger that is older than we can imagine. If this story sent chills down your spine, comment below with your theories about what Ethan saw, and share this video with anyone who loves real, terrifying stories from the unknown. Don't forget to like and subscribe to True Scare Tales for more chilling adventures that will keep you awake at night.